Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Prep Red Zone Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Knight. Every single Wednesday, we talk high school football across the state of Oklahoma. And this week, we are coming off our Stock Up Showcase camp in Broken Arrow on Sunday. If you've checked out Prep Red Zone Oklahoma on the website or you follow us on social media, you've seen a lot of content already breaking down some of the top prospects that we saw on Sunday, from MVPs to quarterbacks to offensive, defensive linemen, every position covered. We had over 100 players come out to Broken Arrow on Sunday to go through combine testing, individual drills, one-on-ones against some of the other top players in Oklahoma. And we even had some surrounding states involved as well. We had players down from Kansas and Missouri, over from Arkansas. We even had someone from Illinois take part in our Stock Up Showcase camp on Sunday in Broken Arrow. So first off, before we dive into recapping the event, looking at some highlights from Sunday's tournament, or excuse me, from Sunday's camp, I want to thank all the coaches, the parents who brought their kids, the coaches who worked the event, the coaches who were there to scout. I know, after the camp was over, I saw a lot of conversations happening with coaches and some of the players that we had there. So, again, thanks. I know Swosu had several coaches there. Langston had several coaches there. Friends, I think Bethel College had some coaches there as well. So a lot of really good work being done in Broken Arrow on Sunday afternoon. But let's dive in. Let's start looking at some of the top moments that happened on Sunday. Let's start talking about some of the top players that performed incredibly well on Sunday afternoon in Broken Arrow. Again, I tweeted this out on Sunday night, I believe, but this was the 10th camp that we've run in Oklahoma since our camp circuit started in 2021. So this thing continues to grow. We continue to find more and more prospects. And that's the thing that I love the most about these camps. Look, there's no doubt, and we're going to go over a lot of these players. There's for a good number of them, I already know about them. Like, I cover Oklahoma high school football 24/7, 365. So for a decent amount of the kids that were there on Sunday, I already knew about them in one way or another, whether I've seen film of them, watched them in person during the football season, watched them at other camps or other 7-on-7 tournaments, whatever it may be. But the thing that I love the most about these events and the camps and the showcases that we do are the new players, the guys that I didn't know about coming into Sunday. And we had a few of them pop up. But let's start with the MVPs. And the majority of these guys were guys that I already knew about. And let's start with the quarterback position. Broken Arrow quarterback Javen Crowley, really impressed from start to finish. He's a guy who I first saw last year during the 7-on-7 season. And I wrote about this week on Prep Red Zone, how the thing that stood out to me during those 7-on-7 tournaments was how calm, cool, and collected he was. Granted, it's easy in a 7-on-7 setting. You don't have a pass rush or anything like that. But Crowley was very calm, cool, collected again on Sunday. And again, during one-on-ones, there's no concern about pass rush or anything like that. But during the individual drills, like the coaches had the quarterbacks moving around, throwing on the run, things like that, escaping the pocket. I mean, Crowley was just so smooth with everything that he was able to do. Obviously, Broken Arrow loses their starting quarterback to graduation, so they have an opening there at the QB position. Crowley potentially in a position to step into that role this fall. I'm looking forward to seeing him more this spring on the 7-on-7 circuit, as well as when spring ball rolls around and he's back with the Broken Arrow Tigers. At running back, our MVP was Max Everett from Heritage Hall. This kid was a dynamic dude on the field on Sunday. He was another player. I mentioned those new guys that I didn't know that much about coming in, and Everett is a good example of that. He performed incredibly well, and it started right from the jump. He tested well. As far as the times go, like, it's not something that's just going to absolutely blow you away. Like, these kids are still in high school. For a lot of them, they're still learning how to properly test when it comes to the 40-yard dash and any of the other drills. So it's not like we're running 4.3s out there, but at the same time, Everett just looks fast, and everything he does, he looked fast, he looked quick. And during the one-on-one session, it was nearly impossible for linebackers to stay with him, to stay on his hip, because he just has those sudden movements that are so twitchy and quick that it gave him immediate separation and he was able to make plays. I was looking forward, or I am looking forward to seeing more of Everett moving forward just because, look, he's playing in that Heritage Hall program where they're no stranger to competing year in and year out. They're no stranger to having some dynamic players on both sides of the ball. So looking forward to seeing more of Everett as he moves on. I believe he's a sophomore, so he'll be going into his junior season this fall, but really impressed with his work. And he earned the MVP award. We had several running backs that were in the mix, and we'll talk about some of them a bit later. But Everett did a really good job from start to finish on Sunday. Our wide receiver MVP, Carl Albert Jr., Makari Johnson. Johnson was one of the players that I had circled that I was excited to see in person. I saw him for the first time last spring during team camp, and he looked like a freak at that point. I was like, that's Carl Albert's next dude. And he had a solid junior season. Not necessarily that breakout because look, the breakout season happened from his teammate Elijah Matthews at the running back position, broke all kinds of Carl Albert records for running the football. So Carl Albert, they were definitely a run first team, but when you look at Johnson down the stretch, he played some of his best football in the semifinals, the championship game, had a really good performance against Bishop McGuinness in that title game. And so Johnson came out and absolutely dominated from the start. He tested well, he performed well in drills, he dominated the one-on-one session, and we had some really good wide receivers. Our wide receiver group was incredibly deep. It was one of the deeper position groups. In my opinion, it was the deepest position group. Like the battle for MVP between Johnson and some a handful of other players was incredibly tough. But at the end of the day, like he's a freak, man. Like there's a reason why I thought he was a freak last year. He's still a freak. He's a guy who, in my opinion, is going to blow up this spring and summer. And he's going to have some opportunities because he checks just about every box that you're looking for from a playmaker on the outside. Let's go to the offensive and defensive line. Starting on offense, Ada offensive lineman Jake Matthews. And just like I talked about with Johnson, Jake Matthews just finished up his junior season with Ada, and he was a player that I was excited to see in person. I hadn't seen him in person yet. I'd seen Johnson in person, hadn't seen Matthews in person, have just watched film of him, but his film is nasty. Like he's really impressive at the offensive tackle position. And Ada, that you look back at that season they had last year, their offense was incredibly prolific as far as throwing the ball, running the ball. They could do just about everything on that side of the ball, and it started on the offensive line. They have one guy who's signed with a D1 program, and Matthews might be the next guy up on that offensive line for Ada. He was absolutely dominant at the tackle position, just a wide base, uses his hands incredibly well. He was dominant during the one-on-one session, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him because, look, here's the thing. At the beginning of last season, I didn't know who Jake Matthews was. It took only, about a month into the 2025 season for me to realize that, hey, this cat can go. He's an offensive lineman in the state's 2027 class that needs more recognition, that needs more people paying attention to him because he has all the talent. He checks the boxes, size, skill set, pass rush. I mean, obviously in these camp settings, all we're doing is pass rush and pass pro for the offensive lineman, but he checked every single box. I know that he can be nasty as far as run blocking goes. So Matthews is a guy who, in my opinion, in this 2027 class is certainly on the rise. And that's an offensive line group. Obviously, Cooper Hackett, Caden Penny, the Aurora kid from Jinx, like it's a very top heavy position group, but there is so much depth. There are a lot of guys in that 2027 class that are going to end up signing with Division I programs or really, really solid Division II programs. And then they could potentially end up down the road at a D1 school. But Jake Matthews, I was excited to see him in person. He lived up to the hype and he ran away with the offensive line MVP award. On the other side of the line of scrimmage, you had former Hilldale, now Fort Gibson defensive lineman Caden Ford. And he's a guy who has come to our showcases before, and he's always been a top performer. He's always been one of the best guys on the defensive line. I don't believe he's won an MVP at any of our showcases before. That changed on Sunday. Interior defensive line play from him has just been so good and so steady over the last several years. He's continuing to get bigger, he's continuing to get stronger, and that skill set that he has, where he's able to beat opposing offensive linemen in a variety of ways. I was so impressed with Ford. Again, defensive line was another position group that it was really tough to just pick one guy for MVP honors, but Ford is a guy who is one of the best at his position, and he moved over from Hilldale to Fort Gibson. Obviously, he's going against one of the best offensive linemen in the country, not just in the state. I mentioned Cooper Hackett earlier. He's at Fort Gibson. So obviously, Ford has continued to get better from a skill set perspective. He's getting bigger and bigger. I heard not once but twice a couple of the coaches there, refer to Ford as little Aaron Donald. Like he's that type of player where he's compact. He's a smaller defensive tackle, smaller interior defensive lineman, but at the same time, you watch him work. And it's very difficult for an opposing offensive lineman to stay in front of him. And when that doesn't happen, like he commands double teams and that frees up his teammates to make plays. So I can't say enough good things about Caden Ford. He continues to improve every time we see him in person. And he's a guy who has made the most of his opportunities at these showcase events. Every single time he shows up, he shows out. And it was impressive to watch again on Sunday. I mentioned a guy coming down from Illinois, and I don't have the backstory on this. I wish I did. But we had a linebacker from Illinois, Dylan Souter, who's just a freshman, by the way. Looking at Prep Red Zone Illinois, some of our Illinois writers, they talked about Souter as being one of the breakout freshmen in the state of Illinois. And after watching him on Sunday, I get it. Linebacker was another position group that was talented at the top. We had several guys stand out, but Souter ended up taking home MVP honors. You don't get guys from Illinois coming down to Oklahoma very often, but Souter was able to make the most of his time in Oklahoma. Looking forward to seeing what's next for him. Obviously, a very bright future. He looks the part from a physical standpoint. Didn't really look like a freshman to me. I had to, double check the roster to make sure that was right, but he definitely had a solid showing throughout the afternoon and Sunday. And like I said, man, I wish I would have gotten the backstory on why he was in Oklahoma this weekend. Maybe it didn't work out as far as dates go, that he couldn't make it to any of the other camps that were closer to home, but we were happy to see it because he definitely brought some intensity, some playmaking ability to the field on Sunday. And anytime, look, obviously I'm biased. I'm an Oklahoma guy. I have covered Oklahoma high school football for about 15 years now. We obviously want the Oklahoma guys to represent as far as the MVP goes, but when you have a guy come in from out of state and just absolutely dominate the way Souter did, you got to tip your cap to him. So he had a wonderful weekend. Looking forward to seeing what happens for him next, moving forward. And then finally, we had another freshman that earned MVP honors for his position group. It was Millwood defensive back Demontre Butler. And that started early with Demontre. He tested off the charts with the combine testing, from the 40-yard dash to everything else. He was one of the top testers in the camp, and then he continued to progress throughout. Like during drills, he looked the part. We had some really good coaches working with our DBs. He took coaching. He took it to heart, and he was able to apply it immediately on rep after rep after rep. And that's one thing that I'm always interested to see. Like, look, playing DB at these showcase events and playing offensive line. Those are the two toughest positions. You can throw linebacker in as well. Those are the toughest positions to play at these showcase events, just because your opponent has every advantage in the world. When you're a DB, like you can't be as physical as you would be on a Friday night with the pads and the helmets on. So you have to, take it easy from that perspective. And so Butler, time after time, was able to do whatever he needed to do to make play after play. So was really impressed with him. Just a freshman. I wrote about this on the website earlier this week, how Millwood obviously went through their growing pains during the 2025 season. They missed out on the playoffs, but they're dropping down to Class 2A2. They have a lot of young kids coming back, and including Butler on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of other playmakers linebackers around him. There were a couple other Millwood standouts from the camp this weekend that are going to be back this fall. So the Falcons dropping down to 2A2, having a lot of returning experience coming back. I wouldn't be surprised if not only they make it back to the playoffs this fall, but they end up inevitably contending for a state championship, because that's one thing we've learned about Millwood over the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years. That's a program that doesn't stay down for long. They don't necessarily rebuild, they reload. They had a wonderful run making three straight state championship appearances. Now they get an opportunity to go down to 2A2 and immediately contend, in my opinion. So that's a look at the MVPs. Again, we put out a breakdown talking about all seven of them: Javen Crowley, the quarterback; Max Everett, the running back; Makari Johnson, the wide receiver; Jake Matthews, the offensive lineman; Caden Ford, the defensive lineman; Dylan Souter, shout out Illinois, the linebacker; and Demontre Butler, your defensive back. So those were the best of the best. But like I mentioned, with each of these position groups, we had some really talented players from top to bottom. So we're going to go dive into some of those position groups. We have some more video to show you from Sunday's event. And let's start with the quarterback position, as we'll go alphabetical order on this one. Our first quarterback is just a freshman, a guy who I've watched a couple of times in 7-on-7 tournaments, as well as our showcases in the past. Cannon Myers from Bixby. And the thing that stood out to me the most on Sunday about Cannon was just his physical growth. Like, this kid does not look like the same guy that we saw a year ago or 2 years ago. And look, that's to be expected. He's now a freshman in high school. He's going to continue to grow. And the improvement that he's had from a skill set standpoint was also noticeable on Sunday. Like, he was zipping the ball all over the field. The arm strength is there. Looking forward to seeing him more on the 7-on-7 circuit, possibly this spring. With the Bixby Spartans, as we mentioned it with Broken Arrow earlier, but Bixby, obviously they're looking for a quarterback. They lose their 3-year starter in Carson Kirby, so the Spartans are going to have a new QB1 step in. And look, if you look at the history of Bixby, they're no strangers to starting sophomores. And Cannon Myers is going to be a sophomore this fall. I think that he'll be in the mix, but obviously Bixby, a very talent-rich program. They're going to have some options, and they're going to have a quarterback battle, but I liked what I saw from Myers on Sunday. A lefty that really stood out from Collinsville, Dylan Hawk Martin. I watched him primarily when the quarterbacks were working with the running backs, and the thing that stood out to me the most was his ability to let the ball go on time. Like, he was getting it out right as his running back was making his break, or right at the right time. I mean, it was impressive to watch, and that was my first time to really watch Martin up close. He's just a freshman. He's a guy who's on the rise in that 2029 class. It'll be interesting. I mentioned this in our article earlier this week. It'll be interesting to see what Martin does, just because Collinsville, they do return their quarterback. They had a breakout QB and a sophomore last fall, so it'll be interesting to see what Martin does, if he continues to learn and develop in the Collinsville program. But he really impressed on Sunday. So he's a lefty that, obviously just a freshman, still plenty of work to do. But for the first time really watching him in person, I was definitely impressed with him. He's a name to watch in that 2029 class. Another guy who has come to multiple showcases over the last couple of years, and every single time, similar to Caden Ford at Fort Gibson, every single time I see him, it looks like he's better than the last time. Union quarterback Dylan Turner. He was another standout once again. He was right there in the mix for quarterback MVP. We talking with some of our quarterback coaches and some of the other coaches. Turner's name kept coming up, kept coming up. In my opinion, like, if we would have done co-MVPs, I would have been fine with it. Turner, in my opinion, he earned that right. But I was impressed with him once again. Like, his ability to throw the ball, push the ball downfield. He was throwing all different kind of routes. He was throwing on the run during individual drills. Really impressed with him. Obviously, he split time as QB1 for Union last fall. I would imagine that he would be the unquestioned starter coming into 2026. And look, that momentum is heading that way. Like, he continues to improve. He continues to get better. There's a lot to like there. And this could be a breakout season for Turner this fall, as you know, the job could be his and his alone. And if that happens, it'll be interesting to see how like everything that we've seen over the last couple of years during the off season, during showcases or 7-on-7 tournaments, how does it translate to Friday night? But once again, Dylan Turner, one of the top quarterbacks in attendance on Sunday. Sallisaw quarterback Case Adams was another player that I was fired up to see, just because you look at Sallisaw over the last couple of years, and they have been a run first program. They run the ball, then they run the ball some more, and then they keep running it. Case Adams had a really solid junior season last fall. He kind of transitioned into that QB1 role. It was his first season playing quarterback, or excuse me, for starting for Sallisaw as they moved their starter from 2024 over to the running back position in 2025. So this was my first chance to really watch Adams up close. I saw him back in the spring, and was really impressed with the way he threw the deep ball then. But then watching him on Sunday up close, similar to with Martin, I watched Adams primarily working with the running backs. And, you know, I also saw him just throwing the ball during individual drills. And the thing that stood out the most was the ball just jumps out of his hand, like the arm strength. And that makes sense because of how well he throws the deep ball. Case Adams, in my opinion, was right there near the top of the quarterback list. We had some really good quarterbacks throughout the day on Sunday, but Adams was a guy who really performed well throwing the ball. And I think that when you look at Sallisaw moving forward, they have the chance to kind of open things up on offense, because not only do you have Adams coming back at quarterback, but you have a ton of skill players around him at the wide receiver position. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do moving forward, because there's a lot of skill there, and they have the guy to get them the ball with Adams at quarterback. Our other quarterback, or excuse me, we got two more, two 2028 guys. Liam Kaplan from Holland Hall. Kind of similar story to some of the other guys. We've seen him at showcases in the past. We've seen him in various 7-on-7 tournaments. Sunday afternoon was the best I've seen Liam Kaplan work or look over the last couple of years. And I believe I wrote about this on the website, but it feels like he has grown 2 to 3 inches since the last time I saw him. It also looks like he hasn't left the weight room since the last time I saw him, because he has put on some good weight. He looks strong. He in that strength definitely translated to him throwing the ball. Was really impressed with him. I wasn't sure, you know, based off of what I've seen from him over the last couple of years, I wasn't sure what to think. Obviously, he's a solid quarterback. But at the same time, I wanted to see if he would take that next step. He absolutely did on Sunday. You know, he was right in that mix with some of the top quarterbacks. Every time I was watching him, whether it was individual drills or one-on-ones, he was putting the ball where it needed to be. Really impressed with him moving forward. In my look, the camp series is called the Stock Up Showcase. If anybody's, I mean, when you're talking about the players that had their stock going up, Kaplan is near the top of the list. And then our final quarterback, another 2028 kid, Bartlesville QB, Michael Kent, another player who is no stranger to prep red zone events, whether it's showcases or 7-on-7 tournaments. And it seems like every time we see him, he does something else that makes himself stand out. For us on Sunday, the thing that we really liked was his ability to move around, because you know he can stand there and sling the ball all over the field. But we really like how athletic Kent is, and he's not always able to showcase that in, you know, 7-on-7 tournaments or showcase events, because most of the time you're just standing there in the pocket and just slinging it. But in this case, you know, I wanted to watch him move around, you know, during the individual drills where, you know, we had them, you know, moving on the run, moving out of the pocket, escaping the pocket, throwing on the run. Like he was able to do that, you know, keeping his eyes downfield. This is a very good athlete, an underrated athlete, a guy who I've been writing about since he was a freshman. He had another solid showing on Sunday, and he's going to be a name to watch moving forward for Bartlesville as they enter a new era under first-year head coach Matt Hennessy this fall. Let's go to the running back position. We mentioned Max Everett. One of the or he was our MVP. Another running back that I just want to shout out was Westmore freshman Elijah Steele. He had a really good day. He tested incredibly well. He's very similar to Everett. He just looks fast. And I was like, I didn't need to see what the times were. He just looks like he has that game-breaking speed. He's also bigger than I thought he was. That was another thing that impressed me, like looking at him up close. When you watch him on film, it's hard to tell like how big these guys actually are. But Steele was bigger than I thought he was, just based off of what I've seen on film so far. He's just a freshman. He's one of Westmore's many freshmen that they have coming up. We just did all of our 2029 stuff last week. Westmore was a common team that kept coming up because they have a lot of talent in that 2029 class, and Elijah Steele, definitely one of them. He had a really good showing on Sunday. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him moving forward. Uh, Speaking of deep, speaking of position groups with just, it felt like unlimited talent, let's move over to the wide receivers and let's start with Brody Merritt. The Bacola freshman was one of the top freshmen in the state last fall, when it came to producing at a high level. And so this was my first chance to really watch him up close. I saw him once in person last year. I believe it was the Rejoice Christian game. And just going off of memory, I don't remember him, standing out in one way or another, but he was one of the best wide receivers on Sunday. Whether it was speed, his abilities during Indy or one-on-ones, like he was winning nonstop. He really impressed me from start to finish. I didn't think that he had that next level gear, but he showcased it several times on Sunday. And Picola, that's a program that had quite a few guys come out and stand out on Sunday. This is a program that, in my opinion, is going to be one of the top contenders in Class A1 when we start taking a look at the 2026 season. And Brody Merritt has a chance to slide into that top playmaker role in this Picola offense. I believe he's the leading returning receiver for Picola on offense, and I can see it after watching him on film, seeing his production from his freshman season, and then seeing what he was able to do on Sunday. This is a guy who has a lot of talent, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he and the rest of Picola are able to do as we move into the 2026 season. Another freshman that stood out, and it was a guy who I was excited to see in person. Stillwater wide receiver Cyrus Johnson. He's a guy who we ranked in our top 10 of our 2029 rankings last week. I believe he's one of the top 2029s in the state, and I think that it goes for both sides of the ball. We've seen him make plays at wide receiver. I didn't see every single rep that Johnson took on Sunday. Constantly moving, rotating around, seeing as much football as I can. But it seemed like Johnson only played offense on Sunday, and maybe that's for the best because I believe he's better on defense. You take a look at some of his film from his freshman season at the varsity level. And he is an outstanding defensive back, whether it's at safety, moving closer to the line of scrimmage as a corner. He has some really good film, really talented player. Obviously, the DNA is there. Dad played in the NFL, played a long time, one of the best offensive line coaches in the state. Cyrus has an opportunity to continue to grow. And I've said this a couple times this offseason already. I really like Stillwater moving forward. When you look at the talent that they have coming back on offense and defense, not only is it experienced talent, but you have young guys coming up in the 2029 class that saw playing time last year as freshmen. Cyrus Johnson impressed me again on Sunday. Looking forward to seeing more of him this spring on the 7-on-7 circuit, as well as when team camps happen in May and early June with Stillwater. Another player who I did not know about coming into this camp, and again, this is another perfect example of why I love doing these showcases. Ketchum wide receiver Gratian Jones. Did not know about him coming into Sunday's camp, and we're showing you the clip that he was able to get. But that's just one of many. He was really impressive to watch. He's a guy who I'm gonna have to go into the film room, check out some of his tape from last season because he was really impressive. Length. He has strong hands. He was able to beat defensive backs in a variety of ways. He's a new name in that wide receiver group that I'm looking forward to seeing more of moving forward. Here's a guy, our next player, Jones wide receiver Hunter Purvis. We've already written about him multiple times. He was the top tester without a doubt, at the camp. He ran the fastest 40-yard dash. He had the longest broad jump. He also finished in the top four, and I believe the L drill. So he was without a doubt the top tester at the showcase on Sunday. And he had, in my opinion, look, again, I didn't see every single rep from every single player, but from what I caught on film, and we're showing it to you now, he had the very best play of the showcase. He climbs the ladder, grabs the jump ball over a defensive back's hands. If you watch ESPN, you know about You Got Mossed. That was this. Purvis had a fantastic camp. I talked about, the wide receiver group and how there was a really competitive race at the top for MVP. Makari Johnson ended up getting it. Hunter Purvis was right there. And when you combine everything, from testing to how he looked during one-on-ones, Purvis had a great argument for being the top wide receiver at the showcase on Sunday. But the one thing I will say is this kid is a worker. I mean, he was wanting rep after rep after rep. He was going to take advantage of his time on Sunday, and he certainly did. He had a really solid junior season for Jones. Obviously, they had a lot of success going 14-0 and winning the state championship. But he has the potential to be one of the top playmakers on that team moving forward. And one of the top playmakers in his class. He's a wide receiver in this 27 class that I'm definitely going to be paying attention to as we move into the spring, closer to summer, because he's a guy who is still flying under the radar right now, but that shouldn't be the case for very much longer because you look at him, he checks off all the boxes. He's got decent size. The athleticism is off the charts. Just look at the speed. Look at the athletic ability with the broad jump of, I believe, 10 feet 1 inch on the broad jump. Fastest 40-yard dash, had fast times in the other drills as well. This is a guy who checks, and again, he caught just about everything that was thrown his way. Very impressed with him. Arguably, if Makari Johnson is 1A, Hunter Purvis is 1B. Like he was right there at the top from the wide receiver position group. Jackson Parks from Pryor, another standout in that 2027 class. Parks was a guy who had a breakout season last fall for Pryor. Didn't know that much about him before the season began, but he became one of their top playmakers at wide receiver. And you see why when you see him in person or look at him on film. He's got size, he's got speed. So I was fired up that he was able to come out and showcase his abilities on Sunday. The pass catching skills are there. His speed is there. He ran one of the fastest 40-yard dash times. I believe he finished at 4.6. And so he's one of those guys who, whether it's, down the line, if a college sees his frame and says, we're going to get him in the weight room and he's going to become more of like a hybrid tight end, like he's not slow. Like the speed is there. He made plays all over the place on Sunday. He's a name that I think more people should pay attention to moving forward. He had that breakout season last fall, and he's continuing that momentum into this offseason. Another guy who stood out in our showcases in the past is Deer Creek wide receiver Mason Mayhew, a young cat. I believe he's a 2028. But he's a guy who I think is continuing to get better and better. And if you look at Deer Creek offensively, they have Gage Gibbons returning, they have Mayhew returning. I think that he's a heck of a football player. I've watched him at several of these showcase events now. I think that he's one of the better wide receivers in the Oklahoma City area for that 2028 class. He had another strong showing on Sunday, working against, whatever defensive backs were matched up against him. I thought he had a really good day. Really strong hands, really reliable route runner, very sudden move it, very twitchy with the way he gets in and out of his breaks. So, he's a guy who has stood out at our events before, and he stood out again on Sunday. I think his ceiling continues to get higher and higher as he continues to improve, like his overall, testing numbers with just getting faster, getting quicker. That's certainly going to help him moving forward because the production, in my opinion, is there. And our final wide receiver that stood out to us is Collinsville wide receiver Max Whitekiller. We mentioned, a Collinsville guy already. We got a couple more coming up, or at least one more coming up. Collinsville as a program had a good showing on Sunday with several kids standing out, Whitekiller being one of them. He's a wide receiver who I saw once last year in person, and I believe he had a touchdown catch in the game that I caught in person, maybe even had a couple. But he's a guy who can take the top off of defense. The speed is there, the route running is there, the hands are incredibly reliable. He's a player that, if you look at Collinsville moving forward, they lose some players at the wide receiver position. They lose some of that skill player talent. They also have to replace their running back. So White Killer is going to be, I don't have their roster in front of me, but you can make an argument that he's going to be the top skill player returning for Collinsville this fall. He definitely has all the potential in the world to have that breakout moment this fall as one of the top wide receivers in the Tulsa area and in Class 5A. He checked a lot of boxes for us on Sunday afternoon. We knew about White Killer. We've seen him on film. We've seen him, in person on a Friday night before, but he definitely impressed us with wanting rep after rep after rep and getting all the work that he could get. And he continued to respond time after time. All right, let's move to the line of scrimmage and let's start with the offensive line. Mangum offensive lineman Aiden Augustine was a standout once again at our camp. This guy, it feels like he's been to every single showcase we've run in the last 2 to 3 years, starting when he was in middle school. Once again, he was one of our top offensive linemen on Sunday. I joked with him before the camp started, being from Mangum, dude, that is not you. You are far away from home coming up to Broken Arrow to compete on a Sunday. That takes a lot of dedication. And this is a guy who's not afraid of work. This is a guy who's not afraid to get in the car, to drive, to get better, whether it's, training with J.R. Conrad in the Oklahoma City area or doing whatever he needs to do, coming to prep red zone events, doing whatever he needs to do to get extra work in. He's just a sophomore. In my opinion, he's one of the top interior offensive linemen in Oklahoma's 2028 class, and he's only getting better. He's very similar to some of these other cats who continue to come back time after time, and that's what we want to see. That's the whole reason we're doing these things, is to see these kids get better, to see these kids get coached up, to take something from the camp and take it to what they work on throughout the rest of the offseason. And then hopefully the next time we see you, you're better than when we saw you last. And that was the case for Augustine. Speaking of interior offensive linemen in the state's 2028 class, Booker T. Washington, Philip Lodeholt was there. He's been starting for the Hornets since he was a freshman. And he's another player that I was pumped to see in person after watching him on film, seeing him a couple of times in person over the last 2 years on a Friday night. But this was a chance to really watch him in person. And we mentioned Jake Matthews being the offensive line MVP. Lode Holt was right there, man. Like, he was right there. Like, we could have given again co MVPs, offensive tackle, outside offensive lineman, inside offensive lineman. Lode Holt was dominant from start to finish. He did exactly what we thought he was supposed to do. Coming into Sunday's showcase, I thought that Lode Holt was one of the top offensive linemen in the group. And then he had to go prove it. And he did. Time after time, when I was watching the O line working against the D line, he was winning rep after rep after rep. And it didn't matter what kind of move the opposing defensive lineman would try to work on Lode Holt. He came back time after time, and he just has such a strong base that it wasn't easy for guys to get around. He rarely lost. It was fun to watch him in person and see, just the talent that we've seen on film, that we've seen about over the last couple of years, seeing it in person in a showcase setting. It was fun to watch. Switching to the other side of the line of scrimmage with the defensive line, a guy who was again right there at the top for that position group, Cash Mathis from Enid. Enid obviously in the news this week, as by the time this video is up on our YouTube channel, it might already be official that Enid will be playing an independent schedule in 2026, 2027. But no matter what, like, Enid has some talented players coming back, and it starts with Mathis. I really like this kid. I was only able to get one clip of him going to work in one-on-ones, but watching him, talking to some of the other coaches that were there that saw every single rep that he took, he is going to be a problem. This is an edge rusher in the 2028 class that, in my opinion, is one of the better guys in that position group. He was right there. Similar to offensive line, we could have given, two MVPs out for outside, inside. We could do the same thing for defensive line. Caden Ford won it as a defensive tackle, nose guard type player. Cash Mathis could have won it as a D end. He was so disruptive, and it combines with what we've seen of him on film. He's a player in this 2028 class that we need to start talking about more because he's one of the more disruptive guys coming off the edge in Oklahoma's 2028 class. Staying on the defensive line, let's go back to Collinsville. Griffin DeVore, another player that stood out as again the Cardinals, that 2028 class, man, they got some really talented players in it that are plenty of experience returning. Collinsville has the chance to have a big season this fall with some of the talent they have coming back in those classes. But DeVore, another player that I was fired up to see in person, strong defensive tackle. Was able to use that strength to his advantage. I mean, there were not many cases that I was watching where he was not able to get by the offensive lineman that was in front of him because he just has that strength. He has that strength to get by just about anybody who's standing in front of him. He won rep after rep, and he's a 2028 kid to keep an eye on moving forward. Going to Ada. We mentioned Jake Matthews was the offensive line MVP. His twin brother Gus was one of the top defensive linemen in attendance on Sunday, and he's coming. I don't know if they ever did it. I should have asked this question as well. But when I was watching, we never saw brother versus brother. That was a matchup that probably would have been fun to see. But Gus did all of his work coming off the edge on the defensive line as a defensive end, and the combination of speed, power, different skill sets as well. Like he had a deep bag of tricks as far as like different pass rushing moves. Sometimes he would just use the spin. Sometimes he would do the swim. Like whatever he needed to do to get past his offensive tackle, he was able to do it, and he was doing it at a high level. And more importantly, he was doing it very consistently from start to finish. Staying on the defensive end with our next player, Mount St. Mary, Cade Barton. Another prospect that I was fired up to see on Sunday in person because I've written about this. I probably brought it up again this week how Cade Barton, during his, I believe, junior season at Guthrie, he had, in my opinion, the most dominant individual performance that I saw from a defensive player in person throughout the 2025 season. Like from start to finish, I think the most dominant performance I saw from an individual defensive player was Cade Barton when they beat Altus in overtime late in the regular season. So I was fired up to see him, and we're showing a couple clips from his performance during one-on-ones, and you see just the brute strength that he has. He is a very good football player. Now, this offseason, he's moved. He's going to be at Mount St. Mary. We had quite a few Mount St. Mary kids out there on Sunday that, are all coming back. This is a team, a program that, has just about everybody returning. You add in a guy like Cade Barton, and that's going to be a problem for Mount St. Mary opponents this fall because he is an absolutely dynamic guy coming off the edge. Cade Barton, a 2027 prospect in Oklahoma that more people need to start talking about because he was dominant last fall and he's only going to continue to get better and better from here. He was outstanding when we watched him in person on Sunday. And then our final defensive lineman, another player that we did not know about coming into Sunday's showcase, Bishop Kelly defensive end Lars Frett. Hopefully, I got that last name right. I was confident with the first one. But Lars had a fantastic Sunday. The thing that always stands out to me about these showcases are the guys that want the work. They want as many reps as they can get. They're, doing their rep and they're sprinting back to the line to get as many reps as they can. And that was the case for Lars. He brought the juice, he brought the energy. And when it was time to do the rep itself, like he had, similar to some of the other defensive ends that were in attendance, he had a deep pass skill set where he was able to beat guys in a variety of ways. But when it came down to it, it was his speed, it was his overall athleticism, it was his quickness off the edge that was able to beat guys time after time. I'm not even going to try the last name again. Lars from Bishop Kelly, one of the top guys at the defensive line position on Sunday, and a guy that we're going to be paying attention to moving forward. Switching over to the linebacker position. We got a couple guys for you. Miles Mayhew, we mentioned his brother Mason. Miles Mayhew had a really strong showing on the defensive side of the ball, specifically in one-on-ones, working against the running backs. Mayhew had a really solid showing from start to finish. He's a name, I believe, a 2029 prospect that we're going to be keeping track of moving forward because he definitely has improved since the last time we saw him. And he's going to be a guy in that 2029 class to just bookmark it. Just bookmark it because his breakout moment might be coming sooner rather than later. Sticking in the 2029 class, Rocky Cologne from Stillwater. He was listed as a linebacker. I might have talked about him in our 2029 breakdowns last week. He probably looks like a linebacker right now. But his older brother, Nehemiah, one of the top defensive linemen in the state. So his future is probably eventually down towards the line of scrimmage, but right now he looks like more of a linebacker. But the thing I liked the most about him on Sunday was he was putting in work on the defensive line. Like he could have worked with the linebackers. He could have dominated that position group, but he got better on Sunday. Like he was going up against some monsters on the offensive line that were outweighing him by, 80, even possibly 100 pounds. And he was putting in the work. He was getting the coaching. He was, trying to get rep after rep after rep. So I was really impressed with his performance on Sunday. He's a guy who, similar to what I talked about with Cyrus Johnson from Stillwater, part of that 2029 class where there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of guys that got experience last fall playing as freshmen, and the ceiling is getting higher and higher for them moving forward. Our final linebacker, Manford linebacker Ryder Tidwell. This guy just looks the part. Like we're walking around, we're looking at all the different guys that are standing out in various ways, and Tidwell was a guy who, watching him run drills, go through testing, things like that, he just looked the part. Like he's big, he's quick, he's sudden with his movements. So he's a guy who, similar to a few others, didn't really know about him coming into the camp on Sunday. Definitely know about him now. Want to see more of him moving forward. Going to check out his film at some point in the next couple of weeks. But he was one of the top performing linebackers in a position group that, again, like we mentioned, it's not easy during the one-on-one session because your opponent has the advantage and it's not even remotely close. But Tidwell was a guy who really stood out to me throughout the camp on Sunday. Final group, defensive backs. Let's start with Davion Oko. Again, hope I got that last name right. Okoye, maybe. Davion from Dell City. He had a strong showing from start to finish. He was probably right there in the mix with Demontre for the MVP award at the defensive back position. I thought he had a really strong showing during one-on-ones from the time that I was watching those guys go through those drills. He was able to win, and he was able to win quite a bit. He's able to stay with just about every receiver there. He has good ball tracking skills. He was able to put his hands up at the right time, break up passes. There's a lot of just, natural skill sets that he had and he was showcasing throughout the day on Sunday. It was impressive to watch. And Dell City had a really strong showing from start to finish with several different guys, offense, defense. Really impressed with what Dell City brought to the table on Sunday. And our final player, Keegan Hillary from Elgin, a cornerback who we were able to catch a little bit of during the one-on-one sessions. And this guy is a dog. This guy was fun to watch just from that perspective of he never gave up on any plays. Like anytime that we were watching, he never really gave up. Even if he was beat off the line, he was still, busting his butt to get down the field to catch up to a receiver. And more times than not, he was able to do that. Like this guy, we asked them before the camp, we asked all these guys, all these campers before the showcase started, do your best. You're going to get beat. It's okay. Come back, get the coaching, and win the next rep. And this guy was just had absolutely no quit in him. That was the thing that really stood out to me. was just his ability to just get up time and time and time again. And he had a really strong showing. He's a guy who I'm going to be paying attention to moving forward. When you're talking about Elgin, this is a team that went 27-1 over the last couple of years. They won a state title in 2024. They made it back to the state title game in 2025. Now they're moving back up to Class 5A after dominating Class 4A over the last couple of years. So we're interested to see how Elgin does in Class 5A. But Keegan Hillary had a really strong showing at the cornerback position on Sunday. All right. So that's it. That's a lot of names. That's a lot of video. That's a lot of highlights. Again, I want to thank all the coaches, the players, the parents who made the Stock Up Showcase an outstanding event. Over 100 campers in Broken Arrow on Sunday. We mentioned, surrounding states, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas. We had even a guy come down from Illinois. And then, of course, just a ton of really, really talented Oklahoma players. Hope you have checked out some of our coverage on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma for more of the written coverage. Hope you've enjoyed this look at the Stock Up Showcase. Also, thank you to our camp director, Matt Hennessy, who always does a great job running our events, whether they're showcases or 7-on-7 tournaments. And we also want to remind you we do have our first of two Oklahoma 7-on-7 tournaments coming up February 28th and March 1st. So it's one of those weird weekends where it overlaps. But February 28th and March 1st, we'll be right back at Neheis Park in Broken Arrow with the Sooner State Shootout. This will be our fourth annual event for that tournament, and then we'll also have a second tournament coming up in April. I believe the dates on that are April 11th and April 12th, again at Neheis Park in Broken Arrow. So we have more events coming up, and then we'll have another camp and another showcase event coming up in May. We'll have the dates on that in the next couple of weeks. But again, my thanks to the coaches who worked their tails off. I thought the coaches did great from start to finish, really working with the kids nonstop. The parents who brought their kids who were in attendance. And then, of course, the players themselves. We're not able to do this without them. I'm not able to talk and write about high school football in the state of Oklahoma without the players, and so they obviously make these events what they are. Was really happy to see all the talent that was spread out across the state of Oklahoma, even into some surrounding states. And the thing that I like the most about Sunday, normally we have these events and you get 35 quarterbacks, 42 receivers, and 5 defensive backs. The difference in the position groups, they're so vast at a lot of these. I thought we had a lot of balance. I thought we had, pretty much equal numbers with offensive linemen, defensive linemen. We had a really strong group with defensive backs. I know everybody wants to play offense, but there were some guys on defense that wanted to play and wanted to get the work in. And then, quarterback group was strong as well. We talked about the wide receivers. They were probably the deepest position group in the showcase. So it was fun to see that and fun to see them go against a deep group of defensive backs throughout the event. So overall, really happy to have this one in the books. Again, on February 28th, March 1st, come out to Neheis Park for the Sooner State Shootout. I believe it's the fourth annual, and we'll see how many of these kids that we saw on Sunday standing out again that weekend. It's a 2-day event. Last year, we had 94 teams at that tournament, well over 2,000 spectators in attendance. It was a fun event last year. We're expecting the same thing again this year. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get all of our video content for free. Again, all of our video content on our YouTube channel. You don't have to pay for it. If you want to pay, you can check us out on prepredzone.com/Oklahoma. Again, we'll have Prep Red Zone Weekly. It's our weekly show every single Wednesday, whether it's breaking down events like the Stock Up Showcase, doing interviews. Last week, we had Jinx head coach Adam Gaylor on to talk about their program scheduling South Lake Carroll, as well as just an off-season check-in in general. We'll also have interviews coming up with first-year head coaches later on in the spring. We'll also have interviews with guys that are already committed to Division I programs coming up later on in the spring. So check out Prep Red Zone Weekly every single Wednesday right here on our YouTube channel. And one final time, I'm Michael Knight. This has been Prep Red Zone Weekly.